Hi, and welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Landon.
I'm Kason.
Our audio's not peaking, so we're good to go. Today we're talking about Final Fantasy 15 episode Gladiolus, which was they released a trailer with a release date,
Yep.
which is going to be on the 28th.
Lots of fighting.
Lots of stuff in that. We'll talk about for that. Well, jeez, I can't talk today. We will talk about that a little bit. And then we'll talk about a lot of the questions that you guys gave to us. So last week, you responded in enormous record-breaking numbers. So we have
to save some for next time too. Probably.
We have probably like a whole month's worth of questions just on the last video. So here are a few that we picked out. By the way, to those of you who are patrons, we go there first. So if you're a patron and you leave us a question, that's where we always source the questions from first. And then we come to the YouTube channel and the Discord after that. So this is from Christopher Guin. After Breath of the Wild, where do you think the Zelda franchise goes with the next installment? Where do you want it to go? Jeff Caruso asks, what were the most infuriating comments ever left on one of your videos? One that stuck with you, rubbed you the wrong way for a while? Good question.
That is a helicopter, that's not a fart.
Raberdine asks, it seems open world has become the norm for role-playing games. Do you guys foresee this trend continuing into the future? What changes and improvements, if any, would you like to see made to this style of RPG? Hat89 asks, should game franchises age with their fan base, like we've seen with superhero movies that were originally conceived for children but have gone more adult, such as The Dark Knight? We'll talk about that. And then Liam Huber, what are your thoughts on cinematic games? Okay.
Games.
Okay, so it's no secret what my opinion of Final Fantasy 15 is. I've made lots of videos about it, so I'm not going to talk about any opinions here. Just talking about what it is.
This is a drama-free zone. There's a lot of drama this week. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the stuff. Some JonTron drama.
Oh, JonTron has apparently been political lately.
Yeah, so...
And
we're just going for the news.
Yeah.
Well, so the first story DLC for Final Fantasy 15 is going to be releasing here at the end of the month on the 28th. It's going to be an episode that follows Gladiolus,
Episode Gladiolus.
Gladio.
But it follows Gladio.
So it's following Gladio at the point in the story, spoilers if you've not played it, where he leaves the party for a while.
Right.
So this is detailing like what he did.
Because he says, left. I'm going to go have some DLC, guys. I'll be right back.
If you want to know what I did, you have to pay me.
That's what he's telling everyone. How it can get.
Anyways.
It was basically what we thought it was.
Yeah.
The, what's his name? Gilgamesh?
Gilgamesh.
And he was going to go, and he
Gilgamesh.
had that to take care of. You know, it's basically what we thought it was.
Yep. So one kind of cool thing about the trailer is they put in a little bit of a leitmotif from I always forget the actual name of the song from Final Fantasy V, but I think it's called Battle on the Big Bridge.
Gilgamesh is walking out.
Maybe that's not the one with anyways, that song. It's a battle theme. They kind of worked that a little bit into some of the music. I think
that's cool.
It's an official song from the DLC, a new piece of music. I could be wrong about that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, anyways, new music for the soundtrack that kind of works that theme in there. It's pretty cool. I liked it. If you haven't seen the trailer, I might advise you not to watch it.
Yeah, there's a spoiler.
There's, a kind of really big spoiler at the very last shot. So what you could
don't
do
even
is
read the comments actually, because that'll get spoiled there too.
What you could do is you could watch the trailer if you wanted to risk some stuff like they show Gilgamesh, like his design, and that might be his
one arm.
If you're you spoil it, man. You spoil it. Anyways, but the trailer plays all the way up to like the title, and then there's a little shot after the title, like the cut to black in the title. that is the big spoiler.
Yeah,
so you could watch it up to that and just like click away and not see what it is.
Right. It's very Japanese to show basically everything. I mean, they do that for movie trailers. Like, if you ever have the option of watching the Japanese movie trailer, not like anyone ever does this, but the Japanese movie trailer versus the, I don't know, general worldwide trailer for something, don't watch the Japanese one.
Yeah.
They'll usually have extra scenes in it, and so people want to watch those, but usually there's a reason why they weren't in the general trailers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird that they showed what they did in the last, because it's just like, okay, now you know exactly what's coming.
All right.
I mean, which it doesn't bother me tremendously, but it has bothered a lot of people in the comments of that video. So just watch out.
This DLC is what, like $5-6, something like that? Is that what it is?
I don't know. Maybe we should.
Felt
check
like it
on
was
that.
really cheap.
I would think it's $9.99. That seems kind of like the standard.
That's Square's.
If it is like $5, that means it's really short, most likely.
Yeah.
Because they'll do anything to sell you something for more than $10, like 12.
Let's pull this up on the computer. $5.
Oh wow!
Five of paper.
That means it's going to be
probably
very,
not a lot. There's not
very short.
In fact, we may have seen everything in the trailers. Like literally everything.
He literally is like, "Hey guys, I got to go," and he steps like 10 feet out, and that's where the battle happens.
right there.
And then he comes back.
So there's a little debate about how this part may or may not be accessed, whether it happens strictly organically or if it's a menu option or both.
Really interested about that. I'm very, very interested about that because I have my near 100% completed file, not totally 100%, but close to it. Level 99 characters, and a lot. I mean, at least what they were showing from the footage, enemies are between the 40 and 50 range in level. So, are they going to make you like start the game over and play up to that point again?
Something I've read is people are saying that they believe there'll be a menu option where you get like a stock Gladio that you can just go in as if you don't want to replay the game at that point. Because we were debating, how that would work with the extra cutscenes as well. But so that's. Again, that's not official word right there, but you know what is official? He can freaking grab giant stone pillars and smash people on the head with it, apparently. Why wasn't he doing this the whole freaking time? Just like a giant thing.
Because he didn't have the power yet, man. That's why he's doing this.
Then he came back and then he still didn't do that?
Yeah, so for those of you who are interested in the very brief general premise of this, right? The context for when this happens is that the party had just encountered Ravis right before this, and Gladio kind of like stands up to Ravis to sort of protect Noctis, and Ravis just like beats a fetch out of him. Obviously much stronger than he is.
I think I got my butt whooped.
Yeah, he's kind of like upset about his ability to stand up to some of the enemies they're facing, and so I think the idea is that's eating away at him as they're traveling, and he decides he's going to leave for a bit to go and
to get more power, right?
Power,
like in typical Japanese media fashion.
Yeah.
Right.
I will give you just one opinion about this, and then promise no more opinions. I think it's kind of silly that they've structured it in this way, and I think they've tried to hide it a little bit as he had a reason for this all along, but really it feels more to me like they needed some extra DLC to sell down the line, and so they structured it this way for this reason. Now, the reason I say this is because Gladio, the inconsistency of this choice, where he, yells at Noctis as they're approaching Titan about, like, doing your duty, like self-sacrifice, all that kind of stuff. Apparently doesn't apply to him in this situation. Now, people will say, well, he's going to get more power so he can protect Noctis, but he's sending them off to go do a very dangerous mission. Go do that, instead of like, hey, wait for me to do this first. I don't know. It just doesn't really make sense. It's not consistent with his ideals as a character to go off on his own to do this while they're doing something else over here that's very dangerous, and he forsaking his duty to do this instead. It's
a little complicated. It's almost like if they had worked something in like Fellowship of the Ring style, where you were all together, but then everyone split and had to do different stuff. That would work. It would make sense to do this kind of thing.
Like Promptos makes way more sense to me. Like, he didn't choose to get separated. It happened as a consequence of the story. So following what happened to him...
it's like, what did happen?
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, that like feels more fluent. That feels more like it works with the story.
Right. It wasn't a choice as much. He was more or less, forced into that, DLC.
Not like Merry and Pippin being like, I'm going to go to this other thing.
Well, that is
and then I'll meet up with you.
That is kind of how the Fellowship happened, though. I mean, it's not like Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli wanted to separate. And same with Merry and Pippin. They didn't want it, but after it happened, they were like, And
it's worth following. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and it makes sense. But, in this one, it's more or less just their personal decision, like, I'm leaving. Whereas for Prompto.
Yeah, so like of all the DLCs that they've announced, I think the Prompto story part is the part I'm most interested in. I think that
who's
has
he
the
pointing
most...
that gun at?
Well, that whole part of the game, you're kind of like on a train the whole time, right?
Yeah,
and you don't really get to, and it seems like Prompto is actually going to get to go around because
we'll see.
He missed the train, so to speak.
It's a stop.
I think his story there has the most potential, and especially the most missed potential from the original story. Like they sort of threw a reveal about him at a very awkward time, and it was totally inconsequential at that point. But with this DLC, they have a lot of opportunities, I would think, to flesh that out and make it more meaningful. So I'm really looking forward to that one. That one I'm very excited about.
Well, plus this Prompto looks the most like Cloud, so it's the most potential with his.
Most potential.
Yeah.
With this one, again, I'm looking forward to playing it. I purchased the season pass back when the game came out, so we'll be ready to play as soon as it come out. And I may or may not do a stream. I mean, I'm sure we'll do a stream.
I think we will, but
I don't know if I'll do
stream all $5 of it, man.
That stream the whole thing or anything like that. Dang. But we will cover it when it comes out, keeping an open mind. I like Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is an awesome character. Always like to see him in Final Fantasy games. It'll be a cool fight, most likely, so we'll update you on it.
So, guys, a special Patreon announcement. We're upping the goal to $405 because it's $5. And Mike has season pass, but we don't. So, if you could really make the half, no, it'd just be great.
On a serious note, we need to talk a little bit more. We'll probably do it after the podcast is over about what the next Patreon goal is going to be, and we'll update you soon because we reached our first goal.
It's not that it's that we have so many things that we haven't decided which one the goal should be. Not that we're just coming up with something.
I think we should hit a $2,000 goal to get Nintendo World Championships cartridge for the NES. I think it's a worthy goal for the
That would be perfect.
See what the patrons think.
Stream it for one day for 2 hours.
Oh my gosh! So there you go, guys. That's the news. So we're gonna get on to you guys submitted a lot of really good questions. Yes. Not just questions, not just a lot of questions, a lot of really good questions.
Yes.
So Christopher's
quality
the first
and
one.
quantity.
Quality and quantity. It's unprecedented. After Breath of the Wild, where do you think the Zelda franchise goes with the next installment? Where do you want it to go? So as for want or where you think. To me, in my magical little world, I hope those are the same thing, and that is that they do an Alice in Wonderland style twist to the whole world of Breath of the Wild, a la Majora's Mask. I think that would be amazing because there's a lot of new characters that because I love the character design in this game. You feel like everyone does feel like a different person. There's not a lot of copy paste NPCs. And so I don't know, you didn't get to know a lot of these people super well.
Yeah,
you recognize them. You know who they were. So.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them.
And there's a lot of potential there for something. They built out this game engine. I just want another world with the same game engine.
Which is part of why they're doing DLC, right?
Well,
it is going to be in the same world, and it's
right?
the same game. It almost makes me wonder if Majora's Mask would have been a DLC if it had come out now, because it is a reuse of assets. It is kind of the same. They change things up a bit, but they're reusing.
That's
today's version of that could be. And so, depending on what the DLC is, that's reusing the world, in a way they couldn't have done.
Well, the nice thing about that too is when you flip assets like that, you can crank the thing out way quicker.
Yeah, Nintendo's done this just a couple times, but they did it once for Majora's Mask, and they had that out 2 years after Ocarina of Time, and then they did it again for Spirit Tracks, and they had that came out 2 years after Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah.
So
Link still had that freaking flat forehead in both.
Everyone has a square head. That's funny. But they can totally crank out a game super fast.
I think there's a lot
when they do that.
There's just a lot of characters to do some cool world building with. Because like my favorite thing about Zelda games is the exploration, which is one of the reasons why I really dig this game, because I feel like it does exploration very well. And so like I just want another world to explore. I just freaking make another world. I'll just run around it, man. Yeah.
So I beat the game last night.
Nice.
Not going to say anything in particular. I will just say generally that if I'm talking about like where I'd like to see it go next, I would like to see it improve upon the things that I didn't like as much in this particular game, namely like storytelling. That's probably the biggest one. So I'm sure that an enormous amount of time and development here was dedicated to figuring out an open world, creating all the new assets and things like that. And now that that's all done, like Lana is saying, if you reuse the assets again,
you can tell
a really unique story.
That's true.
And so that's what I would love to see them do now, is challenge themselves. Now that all of these assets are made, the game engine is made, all of that's in place, challenge themselves from a storytelling perspective. And I'm not saying that they have to do something in presentation similar to like The Witcher with all this dialogue and like that stuff. I'm saying a more unique premise like Majora's Mask with the existing assets. Basically exactly the same answer you gave. So that, and then I don't hate weapon durability as a concept. I just wish it wasn't as it is implemented here. Just less fragility in the weapons, please.
You know, one thing that I was thinking about, it makes sense for your wooden weapons and for your rusted swords. It makes sense that those break quicker. But I wish that the later stage weapons
like those
lasted longer. But they do last a little longer, but not that much longer.
Yeah.
And so I end up like hoarding and stockpiling those really high-powered, high-level weapons because I don't want to use them because they'll break so fast. And I'm like, I've got to save them for for one of the bosses.
I think that's, and I guess it's kind of a mindset thing. I really do see both sides to this. Like, you have Jim Sterling, who I think he is who he is, right? He wants to be a contrarian and a very
it's hard to tell when it's
personality
and when it's the
right. So, but like some of his points, I agree with. I have felt frustrated by the weapon durability system. Is it as annoying as he says it is? I don't believe so. Not even close. However, I also see the other side of it, which is the argument is: does it promote versatility, or is it just an annoying thing getting in the way of you enjoying the game? That's going to depend on who you are.
Yeah.
I see this side of it from a certain mindset, which is I found this weapon and I'm just going to use it now because it's cool and I'm going to use it now. It's going to break and then I'll find something else down the line. Right. And I'm constantly switching up whether I'm using spears or swords or axes or whatever, bows. That's one way of playing that I think is totally legitimate and does actually encourage versatility. There's another mindset, depending on the kind of person you are, which is, that's really awesome. I'm going to save that for a boss fight or something really important. But then some things, like elixirs in Final Fantasy, they're too good to use. Like you
save them and you never end up using it.
Never use it.
Yeah.
So,
but you didn't know you weren't going to use it.
But I think that's more of a mindset, a personality sort of thing, than it is like a design flaw. It's not that the game encourages you to save. It doesn't ask you, here's something, save that for later. You decided, I'm going to save that for later because it's really good and it's really cool. Versus someone else is like, that's awesome, I'm going to use that right now. You know what I mean? So it really just depends on the way you approach playing games and the kind of personality that you have. And you could have either a really good time with this or a really bad time with this. And I found myself sometimes really hating it and sometimes really liking it. So,
and I think that's what they wanted, because you don't like it so much that you're comfortable with it. It's not a comfortable thing to have your weapon break. Nintendo's forcing you out of that comfort zone of always having your favorite weapon permanently available. And that's uncomfortable, so you don't like it. But I do think there's a balance there that's actually effective for the game. But it would be nice if the late game weapons
lasted
a little longer. Especially the knight swords. Like, this was a sword used by the Hyrulean knights.
Oh, yeah.
And, how did they use this thing?
Their supply chain
like
must
three
be
enemies.
Crazy, dude. Having to, like, keep passing the sword to the front, pass the sword to the
That's right, give him
and
more
broke another
weapons.
sword. I think that games like Diablo or Torchlight, those style games could benefit a little bit from this type of system to some degree, because in those games they're like loot based, so you just end up with like a ton of crap, like so much stuff, weapon wise, even weapons and armor and everything. It's just like super overwhelming. Like, so like I got super into Torchlight 2 for a while, and I remember playing that and having a blast with it. But after a while, being like, I don't care. I'm going to take this hammer because I could sell it and do something with it, but. It just gets like crazy after a while. You've got hundreds
end up just with
of
tons,
weapons, and then you spend so much time sorting through and being like, which one is so like this style weapon durability system? Maybe not as fragile, but like that could mesh really well with like Diablo style gameplay. I think where there's this weapon hoarding kind of tendency that people have.
It's funny that the weapons break so often, but almost for me they don't break often enough because my inventory is stacked.
Yeah.
It is stacked with all level 50 weapons,
stuff. Yeah.
Tons of super high level weapons, and I have to pick which one's the worst, and I fight with that
sacrifice.
But it's still a super powerful weapon. But it's almost like the weapons last long enough for me to continue to do this. For me to constantly always have a supply of super high level weapons.
They're keeping the stream. Moving.
I had to. I was doing a shrine that required a Korok leaf to blow blow air, right? And they gave you one at the very beginning, but I had to drop, I can't remember what it was, but I had to drop a really sick, huge, awesome sword in order to take the Korok leaf, and I couldn't get to get it back.
I never have a Korok. I started out, I kept a Korok leaf and a torch on me,
and a woodcutter's axe, and
an axe. But after a while, I was like, I'm not using this that much, so I can always get another one pretty easy. So like I stopped carrying those around, but now I'm constantly running a situation where it's like, freak, I don't have a leaf. Dang it, I know. Find one.
That's so funny.
But where past Zeldas, it would have been like your permanent inventory item, and you would have just pulled it up when you needed it, and you were there, and you had it when you needed it.
Yeah. You know, the idea, the concept of weapon durability, and it's partly because of video games that I didn't really know this, I guess, but I remember I was in like 7th or 8th grade, and we learned about the Battle of Thermopylae, and at the very end, the 300 Greeks, right, their weapons were all broken. I didn't it hadn't even occurred to me, but like by the very end of that whole thing, their shields were all cut in half. All their weapons they were fighting with like stones and sticks, and they were like
just blunt.
Blunt because that's all that they had, or they would take their enemy's weapon, I guess, occasionally. But I remember thinking like, oh, that's no fun. Like, what the heck? Swords break? How does a sword break? You know. But
it is very true,
because you look at the movies and people are literally blocking hits with the edge of their sword, and it doesn't occur to you that is actually incredibly damaging to your blade, and eventually things gonna get snapped in half, right? And so it's cool to have that element of realism in there. This is really the first game I've played where that's been like a big aspect of the game.
Yeah,
but I think it is realistic for people wanting realism.
People who, like Jim Sterling was criticizing it for being unrealistic, but like I think the idea that it shatters into pieces and like just it disappears is something that I don't like as much. But the idea of it degrading or becoming less effective, like its attack base lowering,
like how most games do weapon durability.
Most
games do like this
like
is only
Monster
half
Hunter,
as
right?
effective now.
And
Monster
now you
Hunter,
have to sharpen it up.
The Witcher 3, Dark Souls 2, like the way that these games handle durability, I think is fine. Like it doesn't bother me ever in those games, and so
I would like it if you could see the health. So to speak, of your sword, and then go to a place to get it fixed.
And then Breath of the Wild, after the battle, you sit there and you work the edge, and then you repair it. That's the way that they did it back in the day too.
That's interesting because I like Monster Hunter in that aspect, but the first skill that I really try to cultivate Monster Hunter, or the weapons I gravitate towards, are the ones that lose sharpness the least quickly.
Because you don't want to do that.
Carrying whetstones is such an inventory item and all that kind of stuff. It slows the pace down a lot.
I would not want it to where you bust out whetstones in the middle of a battle like in Monster Hunter. I would want it to where,
which is intense in Monster Hunter. It's like, crap, this thing can attack me sharp.
Yeah. You fight with it, it becomes less effective. You put it away and use a different weapon in your arsenal. You finish the battle, and then you pull it back out and you repair the blade.
In that style game, you would find Hylian soldiers halberd, let's say, and you take that, and that's the only time you will ever take one in the game because you'll always be able to just repair that one.
Yeah,
right?
I would rather have that.
What games usually do to address that is because pretty quickly you would have like everything and not care about anyone dropping weapons unless you're either Diablo style stockpiling to sell. Or unless they have such an insane weapon variety that there's a green one and a blue one, and they're really incremental differences between.
Kind of like Neo. Neo does that.
Yeah, and you end up with a bunch of virtually the same thing.
Yeah, in Neo, your inventory is just absolutely ridiculous, just full of the same things, but like slight differences.
I almost wonder if it was like done to streamline inventory management. Because like I personally haven't. I'm probably not gonna beat this game for freaking another 2 months. I swear. I didn't even play it yesterday. So, but I haven't spent a lot of time in the inventory.
Yeah.
In this game, and I actually kind of appreciate that. There's some games where like Skyrim, the way that I ended up downloading that mod on PC for the better inventory management for Skyrim, because Skyrim's default inventory management is crap.
Yeah, it's not good.
And anyways, I just like I like that hasn't been like a thing. Like, all right, gosh dang, I better sit down, evaluate, all this stuff. Like Skyrim, like I'm too heavy. Crap.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if I'm going through this and trying to ditch some things, I might as well ditch a few more just in case I don't. But no, I want to keep that. I want to sell that. And you end up kind of spending, like, in Skyrim at least, I would spend a good chunk of time trying to prioritize and, like, optimize all that kind of stuff. That might be fun for some people to do. I appreciate, like, any game that can find a way to keep me out of those systems, though.
The way that I would want to address that if I were a game developer making my own game is, like, not having the character be allowed to carry a freaking huge like stone sword, a woodcutter's axe, like 5 different swords, like all on you, and then you just like bust them all out whenever through the inventory. It's like you carry, let's just say you can carry a spear and a sword.
Well, like on your person, you had like 2 weapons,
and you have a horse over here.
You
and
probably
you go store
to
the weapon on the horse, take it to town, decide if you're going to sell it or carry it or not. But like only have a couple weapon slots on your person. Yeah. And
that way, if they did that and your weapon durability, weapon breaks, that would be crazy because you can only hold 2. That would be a super survival.
And you'd have to be able to repair the blade.
Maybe that's the hard mode everyone's going to pay for. You can only hold 2 weapons.
You can only hold 2 weapons.
It'd be the game now.
Maybe.
That's funny. So after Breath of the Wild, it would be sick if they did a top-down. I know this is like a problem, though,
Link Between Worlds.
Like a Link Between Worlds. Yeah. The problem, I want that really bad, but I would see that as almost kind of being like a negative on the series as a whole, I guess, because people are already saying Breath of the Wild, it's just a Wii U game. Like Mike mentioned in our Switch review, that Breath of the Wild is the best game to show the power of the Switch visually, but it's a Wii U game. It's not really taking advantage of the Switch to the fullest extent. And so it's not a good example of that necessarily. And if we go from Breath of the Wild being a Wii U game on the Switch, and that's the really good one, and then we do a 2D one after that, then we never really
we're waiting
to take advantage of the Switch.
Depending how long that one takes, we might never get one on the Switch.
Then it would be the next system,
Yeah.
But I personally would love to see another, especially because I don't know when Nintendo's going to release a new handheld. And they usually alternate console Zelda handheld, console handheld, console handheld. And after this console one, we're due for a handheld one, but they're not going to make another 3DS one, I don't think. They could, but I would think that they do a handheld style, but on the Switch. And it could be a dual release.
It's a really interesting thing to bring up just because they're handheld and console divisions combined,
merged,
or they were merged. So, like, how is that going to be handled? The teams that were making handheld Zelda games and the teams that are making console Zelda games, I assume they're one of the same now.
I think they're the same team. So
I don't know if it's the same development team per se, because there was the
he
team
mentioned
that made
that he had a bigger team for this game than he has previously. And that
didn't a lot of that come from the Xenoblade, the Monolith?
Possibly, because I know they helped with the engine.
Yeah,
so that could be part of that too. But Aonuma himself was directing a lot of the handheld Zelda games and such, and so I don't know who he brought on that was transitioning from either or, but he would do a handheld, and then that's why they said they didn't really start production on Breath of the Wild till 2013.
Yeah.
And that was when Link Between Worlds came out.
Yeah.
And 2011 was Skyward Sword, right? So there were 2 years there that the Zelda team wasn't working.
No, they worked on the Wind Waker HD. That was the this Zelda team. And that was supposed to be something to get them up to speed with HD game development.
Okay, right, yeah. And that's how they found really cool ways to implement the gamepad, and then they made a Switch game.
It would be so sad if they finally had that killer, like, you need the gamepad for this, and no one's ever going to know.
Just not happening.
That's going to be
Apparently it was, though. Like, even the Sheikah Slate, like, it was clearly designed to imitate the gamepad. Dude. And they talked about... yesterday there were some interviews you guys should totally watch. This wasn't in that. But they did talk about how they had to change the story of the game
they changed the
when
story.
it came out on the Switch instead, because the gamepad was so heavily integrated.
Yeah. So that's like, wow. Dang.
That's just so stupid.
That's wild, man.
It makes me mad. Anyways.
So there you go, Chris. That was a good
There's
question.
the answer to that.
Yep.
Jeff Caruso, it's a fun comment here. What was the most infuriating comment ever left on one of your videos? One that stuck with you and rubbed you the wrong way for a while.
Somebody said, I hate you.
It's hard to like recall from memory like the one that bothered me the most. I've had a lot over the years. One pretty good indicator of whether or not a comment has bothered me is whether or not you see a response from a
and
channel,
how long the response is.
A channel from Jamax Wheel Johnson. If you see a response from a channel called Jamax Wheel Johnson, it's actually me switching an account so that I don't have to feel like I have to be
like politically correct.
Take the clothes off.
What's the word? PR. Like
I can just express what I actually want to say without like reflecting badly on the channel. Now that I'm actually announcing I do
Secret's
this,
out, dude.
People are going to start hunting for it, but it's hard to find.
Yeah, I don't do it very often. I only do it when something like really bothers me, and I don't ever like really go off on somebody and call them. Well, one time I called a guy a moron with Maxwell Johnson, but that was because he said to you in one of your videos, like, "Oh, like I hate it when kids try to give adults like history lessons on gaming or something like that." And I just wrote like, "You're a moron." Like that was it, because like that's the most moronic statement I ever read almost anywhere. But that's not one that bothered me the most. I would say in recent memory, it was on your Dark Souls Lost in Translation video. I went off on that guy. Because he was trying to say that you're just a freaking like
a weeaboo.
Fanboy weeaboo.
Well, like a Dark Souls fanboy.
Yeah, right? And you don't even like Dark Souls that much.
I don't.
And I've lived in Japan for a long time.
Anyways, it was funny. A totally like this guy was just being so stupid, making an argument from a place where he had absolutely no basis for it, and like trying to like I don't know discredit what Landon was saying because he's the fanboy and Landon doesn't even like Dark Souls. So I went off on that guy on a chain of like probably like 15 comments.
Oh yeah, because he kept trying to get back. He like, you don't know him.
Yeah,
and you had to kind of be like,
I was like, dude, I was trying really hard not to make it evident that I am the channel responding to him. But anyways, it was stupid. That one rubbed me the wrong way.
If a video gets traction on Reddit, it tends to produce the lowest quality comments.
Like it's a double-edged sword. We like it when our videos get shared. It's super cool. But it does bring people into our community that we don't necessarily want to stay.
Yeah. But like, to be honest, probably the one that bothered me the most was on my old channel. Was on my when I was doing Final Fantasy reviews on the old channel. On my Final Fantasy VIII review, this is back before they had like the reply system for comments.
Oh yeah, had to at people.
Yeah. Anyways, like it would just create a new comment that would just go forever, right? It didn't like keep it all consolidated under one initial comment.
Before Google Plus,
right? So before that whole thing was integrated, this guy came on, and I don't even remember what he said anymore. But he said something that really pissed me off. And so I responded with something snarky. I think Parker even responded with something kind of snarky. Then he started attacking Parker, and that's when I lost it. And like what ended up happening was that we fought the whole night, basically for like 7 or 8 hours straight of just comments back and forth to each other. And the video ended up having like 1,000 or 2,000 comments that were like 90% our conversation. And so like... Anyways, I ended up deleting them all, which took like an hour, but That one, I would say, probably got to me the most, obviously, because I wouldn't have done that otherwise.
Yeah.
But
my least favorite comments are the ones where people like didn't watch the video. Like they comment within like the first 30 seconds of a video, and they didn't watch the video, and they comment something very specific that is addressed like directly.
Yeah.
And they clearly didn't actually watch the video. And it's not just because they're ignorant, I'm so mad. It's more or less like they're looking for an argument. Like they're trying. They started watching this video, they found something wrong, commented, and left. And it was like they were just looking for something to argue about. And people like that bother me.
Yeah.
More so than
you guys remember on AOL Instant Messenger, but probably MSN do this too, when someone logged out, it was like a door closing.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And when someone logged on,
I remember that.
I remember that,
dude.
That was
freaking
hilarious.
Instant Messenger through. Was it MSN or we did?
AOL and MSN.
I think it was MSN that I used.
a ton.
I think I used MSN the most. But
Yeah,
that
me
was like
too. I did
what
too.
I did. I got home from school. I logged on to MSN and just talked to my friends that I was just hanging out with 10 minutes ago at school.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, oh man.
I remember one time you messaged me over MSN like all the lyrics of a Weird Al song. I can't remember which one it was, but it took like an hour or something going back and forth.
That's so funny.
Oh my gosh. So I'm trying to think. I know early on in our channel, like when our channel was smaller, I feel like smaller channels attract more trolls. I don't know. I guess they feel like their comments going to be seen
as much, probably.
Well, because it's like there's not like 10,000 comments here.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's only 5 people.
Well, it's easy to make fun of people who don't have a big following or anything. It's just like they're yeah.
We used to get that a lot, especially on the first channel. The visual effects channel that we started.
Yeah,
and because Mike was such like he was like the feature actor in like pretty much all those videos, there were always people saying crap about Mike.
Yeah.
And like in all those videos, I can't remember any specific examples, but I remember just being like, fetch people, like, holy crap.
It was mostly
YouTube
whenever we would
awful
try
sometimes.
to like dual release it on like Machinima's channel. That people would
and
really
Machinima,
go off.
they would come to our channel.
They would really
and
go
Machinima
off.
has some
I forget that
subscribers.
we have like duplicate videos out there.
Yeah.
Some of them are on Machinima's channel.
And they have sometimes they have more views on their channel than ours.
Yeah, you know, like back then we were trying to make a video every week, and so like they suffered in quality and execution. Like the ideas might have been pretty solid, but it's like in a week, you know, how can you really execute on that?
Yeah.
So some of our videos were just like kind of dumb. And anyways, we dual released a couple of those kinds on Machinima, and that was just a mistake because first of all, their audience did not subscribe for that. So Machinima releasing videos like that was a management problem on their end. They should not have been just accepting whatever. Because Machinima, the whole idea was you make a movie from like video games, like
machine cinema,
and it just totally became not that. And what we were making was like nowhere even close to that. So they
were paying us though to use our videos, and so it was like,
the audience expectation was already in the wrong place, so they're already going to be unhappy. But additionally to that, it was not a super well executed idea, and so it's just easy to target the guy you see in that video and just go off. So
Machinima has such a low quality audience, man.
No, it's terrible.
So and what it's turned into nowadays, it's kind of hard to like even look at and check up on and be like, hey, what's going on here? Oh, geez, look away. So I'm like, sorry, you guys. Machinima just kind of crashed and burned.
Basically, everyone we knew at Machinima no longer works there. So.
Well, sometimes people we talked to wouldn't be there 2 months later.
Yeah, that happened very often.
And it was like, and then we get another email. Hi, I'm your new community
we still
manager
get those emails
at Machinima. And then we get another.
It's like we haven't been with you
I
for
didn't
a
talk to
long
the last
time.
guy. Yeah, like we're gonna really help you out. And then sometimes we'd get a phone call, and then it would be like, "Yeah, man, I'm gonna do all this stuff."
And they never
nothing.
did
And then someone, "Hi, I'm your new community manager." Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes, there's not one that really sticks out to me.
I think Landon's probably not affected at all by.
I don't know why. Sometimes there was a time when I was more, and something snapped in my brain. I used to get so pissed at people online. I had so many arguments about the Iraq War on RPG Infinity. I was on these RPG forums arguing
because a lot of the guys on RPGI were, and as with our current channel as well, a lot of them are from Europe or they're not from the United States.
A lot of JRPG fans.
They're coming at it from just a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
And blaming you for it.
Well, some of the stuff I would argue, though, I think back, I'm like, man, I was so stupid. I literally had arguments. Now, I was a freaking teenager, but I had arguments with people where I was trying to say how much better America was, whatever country they came from, which is like not how I feel anymore. So you can get mad at my teenage self. That's fine. But
everyone feels that way.
But it's like, what the freak did I know? Yeah. And I'm arguing with some guy in Denmark. Michael Chandra.
But why America's superior.
I'm like, what was I doing? What the heck is that about?
Yeah, I remember seeing some of that. That was fun.
Yeah, kind of like Case, and I just think that the ones that get to me are the ones that are not. It's someone coming in looking to pick a fight,
and you can always tell when they're doing that. And it's so obvious.
Whether it's a troll or not, sometimes they are being genuine. They just are nasty people, and they're going to look past all the hard work you put into something to find they're just looking like laser focused on the one thing like this video sucks, and it's like they'll post something that just completely overlooks everything else you did and tries to tear you down for that one reason. And that gets to me really bad.
What I see a lot of, like with that Dark Souls example, is Mike is a really loyal person. I think what gets to you more than anything is somebody ripping on somebody that you care about. Yeah. And like so it's almost, and I feel like sometimes I'm like that. If somebody's making fun of me, I'm like, whatever, you just need, but it's almost making fun of like my brother or something. I'm a little more like, shut up. So I think those, so if you guys want to get at us, insult someone who is not the person who made the video on other person's video, they'll get really pissed.
You'll have to do some research and find out who they know.
Yeah.
Who are they closest to?
I've actually been noticing Steve, my brother, has been commenting a lot recently in defense to a lot of people. So he's kind of the same way too. It's like
thanks.
He gets a lot of criticism on the videos he puts up and a lot of stuff he puts on Facebook and stuff. And he
does a pretty good job of
he
brushing
handles that with pretty good dignity most of the time. Like just like, hey, like this is how I feel, and tries to have a dialogue about it. But it's kind of the same thing. Like people posting on comments from like yesterday's video and the day before that or whatever. He'll come in and be like, "Have you seen? Do you even know what you're talking about?" In defense. So, same kind of deal. But
yeah, that was a good one, Jeff. That was a good one. Did you have any more to add to that? Was there one that you could think of?
Yeah, there was one. So on my Kingdom Hearts review, my first Kingdom Hearts review, which is like 20 minutes long of me talking about how it's a good game and I like it. But my first sentence is something along the lines of the general idea of Kingdom Hearts, if you were to explain it to someone, it would sound like a game that wouldn't appeal to anyone over the age of 10.
That's what
right?
Yeah.
Because it's Disney princesses and all of Disnesses. That's a new word.
All the Disnesses.
Disney princesses trying to use, and it's all about your heart, and you got your friends, and it's all about friendship. And if you just explaining it, it doesn't sound like it would appeal to anyone over the age of a young age.
Yeah.
But then I go and talk about how but there is some serious depth to these games, and they're so impactful, and they're really good games. It's like he stopped after my first sentence and said, "What the f? Do you really think that saying mixing Final Fantasy with a deep story is something that only appealed to children?" And I was that's not what this is though. But anyways, he got very defensive, and I was like, dude, I just talked for 20 minutes about how much I really like this game, and you're gonna get on me for saying that the general concept seems as though it would be for kids who like Disney.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was a comment that really bugged me, because he but it was his unwillingness to proceed or to watch or to find out what my actual opinion was. So even if I argue with him, he doesn't care.
Yeah. No.
In my video, I have talked for 20 minutes in that video about my opinion of the game. Nothing I comment is going to change. He knows what I think. He's choosing to hate the one criticism I have about a game that deserves some criticism. I mean, come on. Like, let's be honest. Even Breath of the Wild, like we were talking, great game. It deserves some criticism. But some people just can't handle that.
Yeah.
They freak out and break when somebody says one little thing about something they like. It just...
I was gonna say
and there's nothing you can do about it.
No,
like, they feel that way.
You
They
can't
think
do
their
that.
game is 100% perfect, and you are not going to change their mind.
That did make me think of like Jim Sterling's review of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
And
People lost it.
Some people
like the difference obviously
really
is he has a pattern of
it.
presentation that is like purposefully somewhat antagonistic.
He's trying to get people to respond that way.
But
on purpose.
But anyone having a 7 out of 10, are you crazy? Like it's a 7 out of 10.
That's a good rating.
It's
man.
not,
on
not
his
positive.
scale. That's actually not.
And people who
above
get
average.
upset about his review bringing down the Metacritic average,
which it wasn't
like,
even
as
his.
stupid. As if it matters at all.
It was Slant that brought it down from a 98. It wasn't even
Really?
freaking him. They gave it a lower
Oh, they
score
gave it a
than he
6.
did. Yeah.
They gave it a 6.
So it was like,
but like people
And of
being
course, it's the people come out
people
later
being
that
so
can do that.
invested in the Metacritic score is
that's so stupid.
it's crazy to me. Like, who cares? Who cares what score a game has? If you like it, then just play the game. Like,
And
just
clearly,
enjoy it.
What's the difference between 98% of people liking your game and 97% of people
what's
liking
more-
your game? Why is that such a big deal?
I'm sure all the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 fans out there are just laughing their butts off. Just sitting back.
Their game's still
nice
number one,
try.
well, are they number 1 or number 2?
I think
Number
they're
two,
technically
It's
two,
like
but-
Ocarina of Time and Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yeah.
So I saw some meme where it was like you combine both those, you get Breath of the Wild because you can skate like on
Shield
or whatever.
That's hilarious.
Oh jeez.
But yeah, it's true. People are like that, and you just kind of have to deal with it because YouTube is not the format to change people's minds.
It's the idea that something that
least not
is
the
my
comment section.
favorite game needs to also be recognized
Right.
as the greatest game ever by everyone else.
Everyone.
And if you don't, that invalidates me somehow. And it's like you get all self-conscious and then you have to fight and validate yourself. It's like, no, dude, this is a fetching video game. Just play it and like it and then, move on.
Don't see kids getting pissed about Math Blasters. Love Metacritic.
No, dude, I love it. I'm going to be totally honest with you. Okay, no, it's not Math. Math Blaster is pretty fun.
It was fun.
Reading Blaster 2000, I think it was. That fetching game has a good story.
I never played that.
I actually really liked Reading Blaster 2000.
Nice.
I totally recommend
It's a reading
it
game.
for
Better have a good
anyone.
story, man.
We should do a let's play.
If you're like
That's
you're
right.
you're exploring like a man, like a kind of like a haunted mansion sort of thing.
Wait, it's not an alien?
You're not in space shooting.
No, I think Math Blaster is the aliens.
I thought all the blasters were aliens.
Math Blaster is the aliens. In Reading Blaster, you're like exploring a haunted mansion, and it's
fetch.
freaking
I
like
had no
you're
idea.
picking up and like reading clues and like trying to figure out what happened.
It's like a
and
Nancy
stuff.
Drew kind of
Dude,
thing,
it was
right?
freaking awesome game. Played the crap out of it. That was back when my parents didn't want us having consoles anymore, so like we didn't have Super
That's all
Nintendo.
you had, dude.
We just had PC games.
They didn't
so we had
understand
like
that
we had
a
like
PC is a console.
we had like Timon and Pumbaa's Adventure or something. A bunch of puzzle games with Timon and Pumbaa. That game was fun as fetch. And then
Do you have that
Reading
Island
Blaster,
game, or-
Math Blaster, Valdo and Marie, which was like a point and click adventure like
All the LucasArts
pirate
games were like
sort of
Yeah.
thing.
The Secret of Monkey Island.
Yeah.
Val and Marie was sweet. Titanic was freaking awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we had all these like obscure PC games. And anyways, they're all awesome. They're totally sweet. You should play them.
Totally like went right on your parents' radar, dude. They didn't even know. There's a freaking video game console right there.
There's a video
at the
game
desk.
in this. Okay.
All right, yeah. Raberdeen is asking. It seems open world games have become the norm for role playing games, or open worlds become the norm for role playing games. Do you guys foresee this trend continuing into the future? What changes / improvements, if any, would you like to see made to this style of RPG?
Good question to bring up. Open world is becoming like a buzz.
Yeah,
thing.
well, so okay, I've seen some people arguing about this. Nintendo's calling Breath of the Wild open air as opposed to open world. Their whole apparently part of the reason is like more the idea that it's more sandboxy and because there are sandbox games
Yeah.
and
which
open
are-
world games that are not
and
sandbox
they're
games.
separate, yeah.
And so, anyways, I mean, it's just a
Wind
word,
Waker
but-
was open sea, open ocean.
the open sea. I want to see some more open sea games. That's what we need to see. But right now, I think open world games push video game engines kind of to their limits right now. Like Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 15, kind of look like, not aesthetically, but as far as graphical output, they're very comparable.
They look,
but that's because 13 was able to
very similar,
super optimize. They know you're not going to run over there or like get too close to this texture, so they can optimize. It's really hard to optimize in open world games, I feel like. So like Breath of the Wild, for example, which is, I shouldn't use an example for a game that's running on the Switch because everyone's going to be like, of course it's the Switch. But the level of detail pop on that happens, we were just talking about this, is not very elegantly executed. Sometimes things literally, pop, it's there.
Yeah.
Instead of fading on, some games will do a little, even, because if you got to do it, because every game has to have their level of detail.
Xenoblade Chronicles X does it. Xenoblade Chronicles X, it fades things.
Yeah, see the fade, that's
cool.
nicer, cool. But Breath of the Wild actually has some pop on, like 1 or 2 feet. Like if you're in a grassy area and there's flowers, you'll see some flowers out at a greater distance, but immediately around you there's always more. And as you move around, if you move quicker, you start noticing them pop, 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 pop. They do a pretty good job of like distracting you from that, but it's obvious that there's a lot of things they want to do that they can kind of do, but the game engines, I still feel like, have a ways to go.
To do the level of detail they want in that kind of design.
Because they can't optimize the traditional way. Now that has nothing to do with like story or anything. That's pure technical stuff. But just from that technical perspective, I would like to see game engines kind of get to where that's that level of detail pop on, pop off, or anything isn't as noticeable.
I think Unreal Engine 5 is going to be focusing, because right now Unreal Engine 4 isn't really used for too many open world games, I guess.
What's the new Ghost Recon using?
The engine for that.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what Ghost Recon is.
But I think their next Unreal iteration is going to really focus on that. And then like you won't need Square Enix won't need Luminous.
They're using the Anvil engine, so it's the Ubisoft.
Ubisoft.
So they're not using Unreal. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, Unreal 4 isn't
you don't really see Unreal 4
suited for open world.
Yeah,
but when it is, and when indie developers jump on Unreal 5, and I believe Unreal 5 is going to really focus on open world, that it's gonna explode. Like you think every game's open world now, like. When the indie developers can make open world, that's when it's going to be like, all right, let's move on to something else.
So, I think the major things that people don't like, especially in our community, which is very JRPG focused, which is very narrative. Generally, the narratives are very big parts of JRPGs, the stories, and they're more linear in nature classically. The things that people don't like about them is the fact that story tends to suffer a bit, and secondly, that the worlds feel empty. And I want to address those as separate things. So let's talk about story first. And we've talked about this quite a few times on podcasts in the past, so a lot of this will be reiteration. But the idea is that the whole appeal to an open world is that you give the player the freedom to explore and do things in whatever order they want. In Breath of the Wild, that's a whole big thing. It's a callback to the first Zelda game. You just go do things, and that's why
you can skip entire
the great plateau is set up in order to give you all the tools you need to then be able to go do anything in whatever order you want. You need the powers in order to solve all the puzzles in the shrines and in the divine beasts and stuff like that. So they give that all to you right at the beginning, and then woo, go. So the challenge is pretty obvious in that if the player can go do whatever they want, and that's the whole appeal of the genre of open world, that it's very hard to tell any kind of like very focused, like character-driven story, because you can take a break from that, and that's going to break the realism. Like, for instance, if someone says, meet me at midnight on Midsummer's Eve for this ritual that has to happen on that day, and you're like, no, I don't want to. I want to go do this quest. And 3 or 4 in-game months have passed, but then you go back to that guy on midnight of any day ever, and the quest can continue. They don't want you to miss out on a quest because you wanted to go do something else first. Right. But I feel like it is totally possible to tell a really good story, but it would require, I think, some really heavy. First of all, it would take some courage to give consequence to the player and allow them to miss something, because they chose not to be there.
A lot of people don't expect a 98 on Metacritic if you have missable content.
Yeah, because it's like if somebody tells you this is going to happen at this time, and then it happens, and the player was over here doing this, and then they missed it. There needs to be consequence for that, which drives the player to make sure they are where they need to be at the right time. But again, that makes it feel less open and more linear. Right.
So you're constrained. You have to do this.
So there is a balance that needs to be reached. I still think it's possible to have the open map field design while still having like limits or requirements for the player to fulfill. But
that's kind of how Final Fantasy 15 works, right?
Well,
you've got the open map, but there isn't much incentive to really go there because of the
Yeah, I mean, you can still proceed to the next story beat whenever you want. It just sits there and waits for you to show up to it. There's no like consequence for just like taking however much. You could take, I don't know, 10 years in-game time of just fighting monsters, and the game, the story would not proceed. The Empire would not have, like the Leviathan incident would not happen without the player. You know what I'm saying? If they could make a game where the world continues moving without you initiating it, and you had to then manage like what you do, I think you could tell a really good story with still the whole open world sort of structure of the design of the field maps.
I'd say we're still about 20 years away from a game like that actually happening.
So this
and it would be an indie game.
What's crazy about this is that links in with the theories that we live in a simulation. Now, freaking don't click away, guys. but the idea that like I'm supposed to link you guys a freaking article about it. But the idea that basically like if there's this probability of life existing in the universe, and then evolution working the way that we understand it, that like even in our own galaxy there should have been many intelligent civilizations that should have already risen by now. If an intelligent civilization rises, creates computers, they'll start simulating things. The idea being that like essentially the first one would probably by now be at the level where they could simulate universes.
Right.
So the odds are higher that we're in a simulated universe than not. If you break down the numbers from that
almost
perspective,
infinitely higher.
So
incredibly unlikely that we're not a simulated
So the idea
universe.
is like if you can make video games where like kind of like what you're talking about, it's like this is a living world. It's just like there's all these people doing their own things independent of the player making things happen. You know, we're like approaching that like level of like. Person alive? Like I don't know.
This actually is funny because just last night I was in the Rito village in Breath of the Wild. I came up to one of the women, one of the Rito, and she was like, I'm so worried about my daughter or whoever. She flew over there and like I don't know what she's doing. I'm so worried. It's like fly over there and find out. This is your daughter. Why are you making me do it? Those kinds of questions bother the crap out of me. And I would really like a world where people take care of their own stuff. And you can help them if you want to. But they're going to move on without you if you don't do it. I think that when we get to a point where you can do that, stories can begin to feel a lot more immersive in open world games and can proceed in a way that feels a little bit more like the linear style of storytelling and has the same impact with the same. But the second point I want to address is the emptiness. It's an empty world. I'm not going to say anybody's wrong for saying that. It seems that some people want something meaningful to do all the time. And to me, it's like it's meaningful to just like take in the beauty of an open world like The Legend of Zelda. I also disagree with the fact that you just run for minutes and minutes with nothing happening. I don't agree with that. You fight battles. You find Korok spirits. There are challenges that you can do. There's shrines with unique puzzles in every single one.
How many villages are there? Like 7 or 8?
Yeah.
Villages.
There are you'll run across NPCs with a little exclamation mark, and you can get quests from them. Yeah. It's definitely not empty in the sense that there is stretches of time in which you're just running and not doing anything, unless you're just not looking for it or you're missing it along the way or whatever. So I don't agree with that, but I think that there is some level of subjectivity in what is actually enjoyable to do in an open world. Whether you come across another fight, is that really interesting to you? Whether I think that people who tend to lean more towards the linear design just like unique, not repeated actions to keep driving you forward. And that's a personality thing. I think, again, a taste thing, subjective thing. But I don't agree that Breath of the Wild, for instance, is just a big empty world. I have a lot of fun in I don't think I've ever once felt while I'm running around or doing whatever, like, man, I'm bored. I wish something would happen. I've never felt that way. And I'm not saying that you're wrong if you did feel that way, because, again, different taste between me and you. But I just wonder what people expect, I guess, from an open world that is full of stuff. Maybe leave some examples in the comments. I know one person said Horizon Zero Dawn on our last week's podcast, and I'll be playing that soon because I'm interested to see what you mean by that. But like, with Assassin's Creed, which is something I can reference, it's just a lot of repetition. It's tons of points and markers. You go unlock your tower or whatever, and there's a bunch of stuff that pops up, but it's like, I can go do another trailing mission. I could go do another of this kind. There's like 6 kinds of things to do. And then there's like...
kind of how Fable 2 worked.
Yeah.
Also. Like, it's fun to do those things, but after a while, it's like, okay, how many times do I have to save someone on the trail from bandits, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This keeps. And...
that, to me, is less enjoyable than just running through a new environment and taking it in and climbing up there and seeing what's up there. That, to me, is more enjoyable. That's just my personal opinion. Anyways, I'm done talking about this. I've been talking forever.
If any of you guys are patrons, in last week's newsletter, I sent out an article, an Atlantic article that I ran across. It was called The Story with 1,000 Endings, I think is what it was called. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, it touches on video games, it touches on movies, and it's kind of about like the problems that like VR and video games hold for storytelling. It's sort of like the next frontier to explore in storytelling is the it's like seemingly unlimited choices, right? Mm-hmm. Like if there was a game with 1,000 different endings, right? Like like granular enough to have like meaningful different endings for different players, and how we overcome the challenges that obviously that presents, right? Because I feel like an open world game of all video game types lends itself mostly towards that type of ending. I like in Skyrim that you can kill people.
And they're gone.
And they were important to the quest. Now, I mean, I like and dislike that, because every time that happens, I just freaking reloaded, so it didn't matter. It just gave me a chore to do. It's kind of how I feel about some permadeath games, but we can talk about that later. But it's like all the interesting challenges in how can we construct, because this all kind of had its genesis in the Choose Your Own Adventure novels with the voting movies that came out in like the mid-'90s, where you'd go to the theater and it would be a character doing something, and the audience could vote what they wanted them to do, and then they would do that or the other. And there was a big one that came out in '95, and Siskel and Ebert, when they were both still alive, because, anyways, they both hate it. They both freaking hate it. They're like, this is garbage. This is a video game. It should stay in the lobby. Don't bring this into our cinema, kind of thing. And we all know how both of them feel about video games. But they said that they were there to have a movie work on them, like a movie, like they were there to experience and not act. So obviously they're very old school with that mentality. But this whole article, anyways, is really interesting. If you guys look it up, the movie with 1,000 endings, it's super long. It'll take you forever to read it, but it kind of addresses like kind of something I think is really salient to the open world.
Yeah,
problems of open worlds present for even video games. Yeah. And then how's a story work if you're doing the way we've always done stories?
That is the one issue with what I've described that I would like to see with the way stories are handled in open worlds, is that you have to have a lot of endings in that case. If you don't go save this town and you just decide to do something else and the time passes and you go and you're like, whoops, I should have done that earlier. The town was destroyed.
Now they're destroyed.
That has to affect long term
and
the ending you get.
It's
right?
like
so
there's that balance of kind of return on investment, I guess. That like I think a lot of developers so far we've seen have determined that isn't sufficient return. That even Mass Effect getting to the point where it's like, that's going to be a little hard to implement.
I think even just mapping that out on a piece of paper is ridiculous.
Well, you go through the permutations,
much less
it's
than
exponential.
coding that into a game.
Yeah, because each decision is a fork, and then you keep forking. Like there were some people locally who did a choose your own adventure YouTube series that we knew, and they had a hard time with it because if you allow for like 3 decisions to be made in something, you multiply the first set by now you've got 2 ways they could have gone, but then those each had 2, and then those each had 2.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like that much. You got to make 3 choices. A video game where you got to make 3 choices would be like I don't even know if there's a game that you could qualify as like you have to make 3 choices, but that's where AI comes in. That's where procedurally generated worlds come in. That's where some technologies we're on the cusp of. Yeah.
Somebody else commented on the last podcast. Actually, we might talk about this more in depth later because it's a question, and we might
just be a topic later. One. Okay.
But talking about what's the next trend in video games after open world, and I think it is procedural. I don't think we're quite there yet, but
yeah. But those are tools, just like AI. So like if you were to talk to somebody like the 70s, like, oh, I want to make a game where you can run around and then like there's guys with guns and they try and shoot you and you try and shoot them. But those aren't real people. But they're smart. They act like people. You can't tell that they're not. Like that's kind of crazy to think about. But like we got there and we harnessed that. It's not really AI. I'm calling it AI. Video game AI is not like what AI really is. But we got it to work, right? And so I feel like procedural generation and that kind of stuff, we'll get that to work. We'll be able to harness that. And that's going to be a real big stepping stone, I feel like.
We talked about like violence in games, I believe 2 podcasts ago, maybe. And, there's some people discussing it in Discord afterwards. So let me clarify first that I don't think games with the primary interaction being violence the way that most games are now, that should go away. I'm not saying that should not exist at all. All I was trying to say is that I think I would like to see more games trying to do a game with a different kind of focus. Big AAA games, not just like puzzle games and stuff. I'm talking about, a big AAA level game where you don't go around as the primary interaction killing people, right? So I think the answer to that is in research and development, working on very, very intelligent AI, where you can have conversations with the AI. However you input that, I don't think people would like to actually speak to, the video game they're playing.
If you want to play it
if you're playing on PC, you could type, a sentence in, but having characters that would recognize what you said and respond to it.
The Kyoto game had that.
Like,
we were looking at
did.
You type yes or no.
I would like to see video games, in terms of like the potential for storytelling and immersive worlds, start doing some R&D in that direction. Can we get a player to just write what they want into the game and have the NPCs react to that in a believable way? It could lead to some very funny stuff too, because if you're playing like a fantasy game and you're telling people about like, I don't know, ancient alien theories or whatever, something totally modern,
like
and they just like don't understand
conversations.
You know what I mean? There's definitely a lot of challenges there. But for people who want to take that kind of thing seriously, like I do, it would be really interesting to see some games start pioneering in that direction a little bit, to where the main interaction is your relationships or your dialogue with NPCs. Trying to figure out like what happened, if it's a mystery or working with people or whatever, and then if there comes violence into that story at some point, it's very meaningful violence that can really mean something to you versus the 10,000th head that you've decapitated in your current playthrough. Again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it should go away. I just want to see some diversity, some different ways of interacting with games other than just killing everything you see.
So one of the, I guess probably the biggest issue, because you're talking about an emphasis on story within an open world game and how that's possible, and it is, but I see like, what if you miss things? What if, like there are 1,000 endings? How, I mean, when you're talking about a good story, right? When you're talking about, oh, this game has a good story or not, or it resonated or not, how is that possible when there are infinite endings, when the vast majority of those endings will probably be bad. They probably wouldn't be good. They probably wouldn't make sense.
Essentially like a life
They're probably like, oh, that got screwed up. What happened there? Or like with Final Fantasy 15, where all of a sudden like some characters' motivations aren't well understood. It's your fault because you missed things. But, you know, and basically I still feel like we would arrive at the majority of permutations of a possible entire story being told in that form are not optimal. Would be like what we would consider a bad story.
That is an interesting...
But maybe 5 or 6 of them, if you do things perfectly right, and who knows how that is because it's all up to you, maybe they actually do result in good storytelling and proper pacing, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
but
pacing's
I see an issue with telling a good story when the player has that much control over whether the story's good or not, and they don't even know that they're damaging the story
don't know
being
that they
told.
ruined it.
I think the answer to that is that you have to choose the right story for the philosophy of design. So, for instance, one of the reasons why I don't think Final Fantasy 15's story fits with an open world design is because the story is about a prince on the run trying to get somewhere in time. You know, there's like an element of urgency to what you're meant to go and do, but you're given the freedom to forsake that urgency to spend time doing the gamey aspects of it, leveling up, doing side quests, and things of that nature. So the story and the gameplay don't really match. So if you're going to tell a story with that level of urgency and like, I think you still need to have some like linear game design in that. And that if you're going to go for this big open world, the player can affect it however they want, it would take
what kind
delivering
of
the kind of story that would fit in.
Well, I guess
That's
what it sounds like
question.
you're saying is
what kind of
it sounds
story
like
fits
open
there.
world games lend themselves in that sense to just kind of blah whatever stories because there's too many opportunities to screw it up.
Right. And even if there is a good story to be had there, like the odds are greatly in the favor of you not getting that story.
Right.
Like massively, almost infinitely in favor of you not understanding or even getting, the story.
Well,
that's trying to be told.
It's hard to wrap head
like
around
the Assassin's Creed games
because
with their
there's nothing
synchronization,
except life.
Like you could have an indicator of synchronization with the optimal story timeline or something like that. Or you could almost have like a guide system in place where it's like we're just warning you are really going off the deep end here. You would need. That's
linearity though.
No, it's true because ideally. Like strong stories have some kind of direction to them, right? And so I guess the idea would have to be how do you preserve that or at least encourage or reward the story you want them to experience over what maybe they want to do themselves through psychology, through systems. And I guess that's where the innovations are going to have to come from because right now I think like for your situation there, I don't think there is a good answer for it right now because obviously no one's freaking doing that because it's too difficult.
Yeah, I think, again, maybe a distinction should be made in what I'm looking for. I'm not necessarily looking for, and I think people will probably point this being like, what you want is a linear story. But, like, Breath of the Wild lets you go do things in whatever order you want. And I'm fine with there being more direction like you're talking about. But not having if you stray off of the direction, then it's game over. Go back and do it again. But rather, the game will be harder now because of it. You've lost this asset or this character or this area. It was under attack and is now occupied by, it sort of like changes.
Games have flirted with that idea going back pretty far. Like I think Chrono Trigger is one example, but I think it's like would love to have one that goes whole hog with that concept and totally runs loose with it, but it would probably have to involve a lot of AI or like honestly because I don't think a human story writer can write a story with 1,000 endings, let alone 1,000 good endings. So it makes me think that there has to be some procedural or computer element that could be constantly calculating, like, okay, they did not do this.
What is the optimal way?
What is the chain reaction of that? How can we possibly encourage them to go back? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets so freaking out there.
It gets crazy, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think more of what I'm looking for is a more linearly told story, or at least the good aspects of one, being brought into map and field design that are large and open. So rather than you being in hallways that go from point A to point B, you have these open fields in a big world, and villages and towns and places. I guess The Witcher 3 is really the best example, to be honest with you. I really feel like, but even still, there are no consequences for.
You can't.
There's no urgency really, because you can just do it at whatever time you want. Having a little bit more of a limitation on that, not just a limit as in you can't do it now because game over. Oops, you missed that opportunity. Reload and do it again with the right timing. But if there was a way to calculate consequences, but allow you to then, oops, I missed out on that. How do I now fix the new problem that came from my negligence or something like that? You know what I mean? So there's still an opportunity for you to fix the problem. It's not like it's over now. I don't know. It's hard to wrap my head around.
It gets into the whole realm of like, can AI create art, right? Because I feel like it would have to be such a strong component there. Can an AI substitute for a human writer in a scenario, and have it appear to be a seamless experience for the end user? I think that would be kind of the ideal solution to a lot of this.
It would be hard to have, like, a human can, I guess, help in some ways to generate, to give the ideas, but it needs to be done by not a human. It can't be done by a human.
But you're right. You certainly don't want to have a person play 60 hours of a game to get a crap ending,
right?
And
which
not
would
be
likely
able,
happen.
Not be able to go back to in any reasonable time to like, oh, let me go back to an hour before the end and like get the good ending. Like you definitely don't want that. So I would think there'd have to be a way where you suffer a consequence for negligence, but
it's not breaking, right? It's not.
But you can. If you work hard, or if there's, in some cases, obviously you'd want to do a permanent consequence. Exactly. Like that character's gone.
The character's dead. The town is destroyed. Right?
And so that part of the ending's locked, but you can still somehow salvage the situation and get an ending that feels nice.
So it could be the character died, but they told the secret to this one person who now is somewhere else. But then what if they die? Oh, but they told it to someone else.
Have to have a contingency plan for the contingency plan.
Exactly.
This makes me think of, like, every time I've ever watched like a James Bond movie or a spy movie or something, I'm like, fetch, I would have screwed that first thing up in this whole movie. And like the rest, like Casino Royale, for example, he's freaking chasing that dude down, climbing.
The bomb maker,
I'm like, dude, I would have been like, fetch it. And then like none of the rest of this stuff would have happened. Or like he had to take the shot and shot him like from so far away and just like it was perfect. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
All right.
That was Raverdeen. Thank you, Raverdeen.
Nice.
Hat 89.
Long one.
Should game franchises age with their fan base like we've seen with superhero movies originally conceived for children but have gone more adult, such as the Dark Knight series? I'd like to see a series like Final Fantasy move away from the typical 17-year-old daddy issues main character and steal towards a more adult character with adult problems that I can identify more easily. Should long-term game franchises make similar considerations to appeal to their older fan base, as many of the superhero movies have done?
I have something to say about this.
Yeah, actually. I was going to say this is a little bit of an issue with Japanese media, because an overwhelming amount of Japanese anime and video games are a 17-year-old such and such, a 60 or something.
That's true. American stuff is more open to telling stories with older people, right?
A lot of rated M games.
Yeah,
coming out of America.
Whereas in Japan, it's usually high school age, boy or girl, either one. Basically all the anime are around a kid who's around 15, 16, boy or girl, either one. But
and then the detective on the case is
the youngest. Exactly. Oh, he's the youngest detective ever, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. But I was listening. So you were talking, I think last podcast, Mike, about like Legend of Zelda. It's the same, the story more or less. It's the same story more or less. There's differences, but it's the overall picture is very similar to the ones that came before it. And I was thinking, like, I think you guys will be able to identify this even outside of Zelda. I think this works for Final Fantasy as well. But I feel like a lot of people who follow us are around our age. Maybe a lot of you are a bit younger. But the Final Fantasies that came out that are my favorite just happen to be the ones that came out when I was around 13-ish, right? 14, the 6, 7, 8, 9. Then my favorite Legend of Zelda would be, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Ocarina of Time, like that time when I was a teenager, right?
When you're impressionable, when you haven't seen it before. Yeah.
And so games, like, as much as I would like it if Legend of Zelda would grow up with me and focus on me, I'm their fan base, even though the first one came out before I was born. And even when Ocarina of Time came out, that was the 5th time that story had been told. That was the 5th game, So, the criticisms of it's the same story again work, except I didn't play the first Zelda. Yeah. I didn't play the second Zelda. I played Link to the Past was the first time I was exposed to that story.
Yeah.
And so, and of course the story evolved. It's not the exact same from the first ones, but Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past are incredibly similar.
Yeah.
But even after playing Link to the Past, I didn't go back and play Zelda 1 for like 20 more years. I didn't do it. And so the idea of the games should grow with you, I think is it's a losing strategy on the company of the game maker. Because you're no longer impressionable. You are not going to have your new favorite game be this new one that came out at this time. Like the age where everyone's favorite games come from typically are the teenage years.
Their first experience
with it. And so should Breath of the Wild have maybe told a different story and maybe not had Ganon or Zelda or whatever, which, that's the whole Triforce thing, then, like, what of people who are 13 or 14 now who didn't play Twilight Princess? They didn't play Wind Waker. They were 8 when Twilight Princess came out, or 7, and then they were like 3 when Wind Waker came out. And so now, actually, probably they weren't anyways. So, and Skyward Sword would be the most recent one, I guess. They were 8 when Skyward Sword came out. So they haven't experienced that story yet. And I think, especially paralleling like Legend of Zelda with a lot of like Studio Ghibli films or a lot of like coming of age tales, or that's why Link's always the Triforce of Courage. He's a young kid who the odds are against him, but he's going to do it anyways, and he's not really that old. Anyways, I think that story it works so well for that age, right?
Yeah.
For people who are that age, and it is timeless. And if you change it too much, then just because it had been done before, then you miss out on the people who are impressionable, who are 13 or 14 now, and who didn't play those games.
Yeah.
And I think there's incredible value and merit to that. And I think that, I made my point pretty well.
I agree. I think there are very few franchises that have legitimately grown up with their audience. One being Harry Potter. Because Harry Potter grew up.
Because he grew up.
Yeah, because he grew up.
It's a
and
7-year
the tone of each book
story.
Fit something that would appeal to the tone of a kid roughly that age, right?
That's true.
And it helps when you are literally the same age as
and
the
you're
character,
the same age as the
almost
character.
in every book that comes out.
That's true, yeah.
What happened with The Dark Knight, as an example, is not a audience that grew up with such and such, because Batman started in World War II, basically.
Yeah. It started a long time.
What we're talking about here is a cultural trend, a greater cultural trend of I want something more lighthearted, or I want something darker. Yes. And it's a pendulum. It goes back and forth. It's the same like right now, if you have an iPhone, you look at it, you have a very flat UI. But I guarantee you, in about 10 more years, they're going to go back to something like the skeuomorphism, something that feels more 3D.
Yeah.
And then about 10, 15 years after that, they'll go back to something that looks flat again. It just goes back and forth.
With open worlds being really big,
open world,
and then that'll swing back to linear.
It just is like people get sick of something, and there's a real good replacement for it that almost represents the polar opposite, and you can swing back that way. So right now, The Dark Knight happened, but you have Marvel films right on the heels of The Dark Knight, because honestly, I think The Dark Knight was peak dark superhero.
Yeah, we're slowly going back
Warner
to more
Brothers,
optimistic.
Yeah, Warner Brothers has shown freaking no. Like, people aren't in it for just the dark superhero thing. So I wouldn't typify Dark Knight as being like growing up with people who like Batman. I wouldn't say that. I would say it's just a greater, like when you look at the Star Trek and other movies that get franchises, Lord of the Rings even, that came around that time, pretty dark stuff. And then we're right now in a Guardians of the Galaxy Marvel Cinematic Universe thing where it's much more lighthearted. I remember when Barack Obama got elected president, and there was some guy who was reviewing the first Star Trek reboot that J.J. Abrams did.
Yeah.
And he was saying, this movie totally typifies like the positive, optimistic spirit that America has now.
Now that Obama's
forward-thinking, young, fresh minds at work, as opposed to the previous Star Trek, which was the last one with the Next Generation cast. And it was way darker story, and it represented the dark, depressing, gloomy times of the Bush administration.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, and he was making all these connections there,
gosh.
and it's just like I probably wouldn't have anything to do with
nonsense.
making that Star Trek reboot. But
with Batman, though, I remember when I was like 10 and Batman Forever or Batman vs. Robin came out, and I was like, why is Batman PG-13? I remember even I was a kid, and I was like, Batman's for kids, you know, because I watched the cartoon, and I had the little action figures. Yeah. And I was like, I want to watch the movie now. And it was PG-13. I couldn't watch it. And my parents wouldn't let me.
Well, and we watched the Adam West show.
Yeah, we watched that growing up.
Bam! Yeah.
But yeah, I remember thinking, why is Batman PG-13? And so I still wouldn't say, you know, that The Dark Knight was necessarily growing up. It was still geared, at least in some way, even in the 90s, towards an older audience than the kids.
And kind of a strong reaction, like you're saying with the pendulum, to the silly Batman versus Robin, previous Batman
films
the George
Clooney,
had swung that way so far that audiences were rejecting that.
Yeah.
And so it was a big knee-jerk almost reaction that worked because they had a very competent filmmaker making it.
Same James Bond went through the same thing.
Yeah.
James Bond movies got peak, like freaking ridiculous, unbelievable, with The World Is Not Enough and all that stuff. Yeah. And then with Casino Royale, they're like, all right, we're bringing it back.
Grounding it.
And every series kind of it's a trend.
A James
it's
Bond
not
based
a
in
growing
reality.
up thing. Yeah, it's not like people who grew up with Bond and it's maturing with them as they grow up. It's something else.
So excellent points on both sides, and I definitely agree. I think that here's what I'll add to it is I've thought about this a lot as I played through Breath of the Wild. Is like, what if I were 12 years old again and this were my first Zelda game? I'm certain that I would have loved it just as much as I love Ocarina of Time for how it sort of like changed me as a youth.
I've come to a similar conclusion.
I think that Breath of the Wild, going along with your point, Ocarina of Time came into my life at exactly the right time for it to be impressionable, for it to be a coming-of-age tale about a kid that was about the same age as me, and turning into the age that I wanted to be, that I was looking forward to. It was just like a perfect storm, a perfect mix of elements for a kid of that age who had not seen something like that before to really be impacted by something like that. So it is absolutely true that the iterations on that story are going to become fatiguing to somebody when they've already seen it 4 or 5 times,
30,
and now they're an adult and they realize it doesn't have as much depth as I thought it did when I was a kid. That being said, with Breath of the Wild, I don't think there's anything wrong with reiterating the same basic premise. I really don't. And I'll clarify that now if it has seemed like that's my main problem with Breath of the Wild. That isn't. I'm totally okay with them reiterating the same tale. It's the Ganon story. I would prefer that they do something else, but I'm not going to say it's a bad story because it's a reiteration of this plot of this premise. My major problem with Breath of the Wild is that it holds no surprises for me in anything else. And again, I'm trying to be as objective here as possible in the analysis, but with Ocarina of Time, right, like nobody saw it coming that he was going to jump forward in time and become an adult. That was like, whoa, that was a big moment of surprise in the story.
Except if you had followed the production of the game
Unless-
really closely, and that's the problem with Breath of the Wild. If we had never played at E3, if we'd never seen any of the footage, it's so hard to go back to that time, where it's like, we don't know any of this stuff.
I still hold even that because we saw at the very beginning, and I remember at the time being like, whoa, that was that was crazy
and unexpected. Yeah.
And I'm not using that experience to say like, oh, it held no surprises because I already seen, you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is that I went around and I did all of the memory Sheikah Slate things.
Right.
There was not like a single part of the story anywhere where it was like, whoa, that I didn't expect that to happen, or that was kind of a twist, or it was like everything proceeded exactly as you would expect it to. From beginning to end.
There was one for me where I did feel that way, but I don't know if we should talk about it.
Yeah.
But there was one.
What's a general reference? Just like a word you can say so I know what you mean.
Like
Rosebud.
Rosebud. It's I don't know. I probably shouldn't. But I can't remember where it was. But there was a specific memory where after I was like, holy crap. Like, you know. But it wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't like a revelation. It was just like you know, they're screwed. You know, this was 100 years ago. Like they are like so screwed. They are so unprepared for what's coming.
I see.
Right?
Yeah,
they
I know
are
what you're talking about now.
and they know it. And it's like it was just crazy to me. You can see it in their eyes,
so
and you can tell.
I'm glad you brought this up because there is, you know, in terms of like the final act, like the ending moments of the game, there was a part where I felt what they were going for with that idea, like where it was like not prepared for what's coming.
Right.
Totally screwed, and the impact of having that weigh on you for so long, and then this is the moment where we can finally rectify this. And it was like, especially the music in that scene, I think was what really communicated that to me. But I just didn't feel like the character development, like I wasn't actually attached to any of the people. So they're saying they feel so strongly about this. And I understand logically the idea because all this time they've been waiting for it and like the scene you're talking about. But I didn't get to know any individual player in that scenario well enough to be connected to their personal ambition or how badly they want that.
Yeah.
And so the impact was not as strong as it had the potential to be.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for them to improve on.
Like in the next one.
The next one.
I got you, yeah.
So, if that makes sense, I'm totally fine with the premise being what it is, as long as they can communicate that emotion from the characters to me, you know?
So on the topic of franchises aging with people here,
so
that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, getting back to that. So
yeah, I can see that. I see where it has worked really well to do that, you know?
Yeah.
I wonder if The Legend of Zelda could pull something like that off. I feel like Twilight Princess is the closest I feel like we've seen to them trying to do that. And what's so crazy is I feel like that was also a cultural trend.
It was.
Because Twilight
right at the same time.
and all that, they were like the same year.
That's
it's
true.
super weird.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like that's still not what, you know, Hat 89's
I think
asking
going back to Kaysen's point about this is that everybody would like things to grow up with them.
Yeah.
But now you're not taking into account the majority of the people, their target market is probably not 30-year-olds with kids. It's probably, you know, kids with lots of time to play video games who have parents that'll buy the game for them or whatever. That's not always the case. I mean, a lot of rated M games come out. They obviously are targeting older people.
So the average age of a video gamer now is like about 35.
I think that rather than expecting developers to cater to your growing sensibilities as you mature and as you age, rather than doing that, I think that you can set that aside and say, like, this is a game that's made for this age of people or whatever, generally speaking. I can still enjoy that for what that is, even if it's not going to stimulate me intellectually or provide me with some kind of really deep emotional thing the way that I'm looking for with my new sensibilities at this age. I have a new thing for that, right? A new place to go for that, and I can still enjoy this for what this is. And instead of like asking them, no, stay with me, let them do what they do, and you can either move on and grow on to something else.
Yeah, when you go see a movie, you go to a movie theater, you see the faces in the theater, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a movie where you're like, the crap are you watching this movie for? Like a really old person in something you think they would be interested in, or someone who brought like a little kid, and you're like, this kid's gonna be scarred for life. Get this kid out of here.
Watching this,
like, this is a bad idea. But either way, you go to a movie and you see the gist of kind of what the demographic probably was for that movie, right? You kind of, okay, I see what they're going for here. When you play a video game, you play it by yourself, or with another person in the room or two people, but you play by yourself. So it's really easy, I think, with video games to be like, nah, man, this was for me.
Yeah.
Because I was the only one there.
Yeah.
But this game sold like, 1 million copies, and, so it wasn't. But it's easy to be like, your experience the whole time was like, it was just me. You go to a movie and you see like, oh, this kid likes this, and this old man, Pixar movies I think are great for getting a wide variety of ages and stuff like that. But I think there's a kind of playing into that a little bit, maybe, that it's easy to feel like a video game is a more personal experience because you generally experience it by yourself. So it's easy to think that like, no, this isn't what I wanted. Didn't you know I liked this one,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like, I've had some of those feelings myself over the last probably 10 years with Final Fantasy, as it has not been for me what they were for me when I was a teenager. This, like, wanting them to go back to that, but I think the real issue is just that I've grown out of the demographic that they generally target with Final Fantasy, and so while I can still go back and have my memories with the games that I played and experience those feelings again, if I played Final Fantasy VII legitimately as it was as a 30-year-old, would I still like it as much as I did? It's impossible to say, but I think there is an argument to be made that, like, probably not. You're not as impressionable at that age as you were here.
Or you would have had a passing familiarity with, maybe not in Final Fantasy VII's case, but you would have had a passing familiarity with the gist of the plot and the story.
And so, anyways, there's definitely an argument to be made that they probably shouldn't be targeting an aging demographic, especially since eventually those people are going to die. And then what happened to all these fans you could have cultivated?
It's game dev story.
It's exactly game dev
story.
You
need to have your people when you're screwed in game dev story.
It's a Kairosoft mobile game.
Yeah, everyone should download and play it.
You should play
it. Amazing game.
Yeah, very fun.
It's basically just about you have a game studio and you build it and you make games and release them. And anyways, it keeps track of like how many people you have in each sort of like age demographic. And as your fan base ages, it's like we gotta get some new fans, younger fans, so that we can continue our business over time. And so that's definitely a factor when they develop these games.
And in game dev story, you always want a younger, like, you never want to target an aging demographic. You always want the 13 to 17 demographic.
Yeah.
Always.
On the topic of Final Fantasy franchise having younger protagonists and stuff like that, especially lately, I feel like that must play into the whole 4-quadrant concept, because most movies or games, if you want to maximize your profits and you're spending a lot of money, usually like big tentpole films will try and be a 4-quadrant film where they'll appeal to male and female, old and young.
Right.
And a really good way to appeal to young people is have someone about their age or close-ish to their age.
Yep.
Older people, I think, are more accepting of watching a younger person's story than younger people are watching an older person's story.
Definitely. That's a good...
I feel like there's some give and take there.
Yeah, like...
there's a reason Spider-Man was like one of, if not my favorite, superhero.
Oh yeah.
He was just out
he
of
went
high
to school,
dude.
And then he just came up from school and
he was Spider-Man.
punched some guys in the face.
Yeah, and whereas Batman's like, okay, he's an older billionaire. I still liked him. He was cool. But Spider-Man I could identify with him. He's just
hard
a kid.
time relating to a billionaire.
Yeah, I had a very hard time. But just his age. Bruce Wayne's old. He's established. And Superman, Clark Kent, he's older. At least he looks older. I don't know how old he really is.
I don't know.
In Krypton years. But, he's established. He's a grown man. And Peter Parker was still a kid. So
yeah. So it might be the unfortunate facts of marketing that is giving you stories that you aren't the right age for anymore.
So instead of wanting or demanding that a company make something that you liked as a teenager that now it applies to you as an adult, just look for a new thing and be like, that thing was great when I was 14 and I loved it, and that'll forever be my favorite thing when I was 14. Now I'll find a new favorite thing as an adult.
Right. I see a lot of criticism of like the Persona series, for example. People saying it's freaking another group of high schoolers with fantastical abilities that you telling the same story again.
Yeah.
And again.
If Persona wasn't in high school, what would it be? Like,
I guess there's other things you could do, but
you could go to a workplace environment. I guess.
Got to grow up with you, dude.
Half the game is like you're in school.
working at the cubicle. At the office.
Get a fantastical ability.
Then you become, I don't know, some kind of manager.
Yeah.
Become a Saturday man.
Level up your manager, Arcana, and then
and all the while go
really
battle
sick managing beasts.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good question, Hattie. I hope we answered that like sufficiently for you. Hope it doesn't sound like we're dismissing the premise of what you're talking about. It's absolutely a thing that does happen. I just don't think it's really happened very often. I think it's pretty rare. Liam Huber's asking, what are your thoughts on cinematic games? What, did he expand on this?
Like,
or are you talking like The
I remember
Last
that
of Us?
question.
That was the whole question.
Okay.
And the reason I put this in here is because I had a thought about
Was
it.
it like
Let me
Heavy
recall
Rain,
it.
or-
Let me recall it. And it was
Like,
I was going to want to touch on maybe part of what we've already talked about a story that either the player sort of like changes and molds through interaction versus having it be
Versus
like
Heavy
Siskel
Rain.
and Ebert who want it just told
to be
to them.
to experience
They
it.
want to
not-
experience it, not act.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of maybe maybe I can spark a conversation about that. So
Well, the first game I ever played where I after I finished it, I was like, dude, that was like an effing movie, was Mass Effect.
Yeah.
I beat first Mass Effect and I was like, holy crap, dude, that's like they need to make this into a movie because I feel like it would work as a movie. And I felt at least
They
in
even
that
had
game
film
like
grain.
they had a lot of
blur
film
in the
grain.
options.
They even had a 24 frames per second.
That's right, they did, which is funny.
I don't know what the frame rate really was, but
Yeah,
that blew me away though.
I think that there's a place for it. I don't think that like one or the other style of game is the right one. I think that obviously Uncharted, it's very popular. I enjoyed The Last of Us a lot. It's very cinematic. I love Mass Effect. Like some of my favorite games of all time are very cinematic games. So there's definitely room for it. There's no reason to say like it's a bad thing by any means just because I can go to the cinema to see a movie, a cinematic experience. A game should not be that. I don't think that's true. I think you can make it work.
A big part of the reason why I cared at all about Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 was because of their FMVs.
Cutscenes.
And like just taking the Final Fantasy 7 disc and just watching the FMVs or playing Final Fantasy 9 just to get to an FMV. Or it was the same.
Nine's FMVs were unbelievable.
Oh yeah, they're really great.
Phenomenal.
They're really great, and it was like someday games will look like this, and we're like way past that now. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Not in animation quality all the time, but yeah, it's like that was a draw for me. So it works on people that there'll be a cutscene, like, and get really excited. I don't remember who I was with exactly, but I remember the first time I was playing a game or showing someone a game where they were like skipping the cutscenes. I was like, "The F are you doing? What the crap?" And they're just like, "Nah, I just want to play. I just want to play." They're like, "The crap, dude." Dude, now you don't even know what's going on. Like, why? Oh my gosh, might as well go play freaking table tennis because it doesn't matter if you just want something to do. Go swimming. I don't know. Go for a jog. Never got that. I always really looked forward to cutscenes.
Yeah.
In games or like Ocarina of Time. I thought it was so cool. The camera moved, man. Oh my gosh! Like it was down there in the horse. She was riding on the horse, and there was fire.
Cinematography for its time.
I think that when it comes to cinematic games, there is definitely a level of balance you want. I think you want to steer away from. It depends on who you are. A lot of people would like to steer away from Metal Gear Solid 4, which is mostly a movie,
right?
And find more of a balance like The Last of Us or Uncharted, where there's a lot of stuff that you do in between cutscenes, and a lot of the way the game's designed as well, like the action sequences are kind of funneled in such a way where you can get a really cool camera angle on the action, and there's that scene in the fourth Uncharted where they're riding a motorcycle, but the camera's in front, right? So it's coming at them, and you see the big thing.
The thing coming behind them, yeah.
So that's a cinematic choice. That's meant to sort of wow you with spectacle, but you wouldn't be looking this way
as you're
while you're driving, so you can have the best cinematic experience possible as you're running for your life.
No, that's why you do Jurassic Park. So you got a side view mirror to have that cinematic experience.
It's
objects maybe closer than they appear.
It's a stylistic choice, and I think that games like Mass Effect and Uncharted and The Last of Us, and even in a lot of ways Metal Gear Solid, have sort of like found a good way of approaching that kind of stylistic presentation. I would like to see more attempts, because those games are so popular. I think a lot of developers sort of lean towards that, as like, we need exposition here, cutscene. Right. We need this plot beat to happen, cutscene. I think that there are some more creative ways that they could approach telling this story through gameplay that have yet to be explored, and I would like to see more of that. I'm not saying the other should go away.
Sometimes it's just I see some games and I sit there and think, like, why is this a game? Why wasn't this a movie? Or vice versa. Why did you make this a movie and not a game? I mean, you should have had a reason, not just because because we wanted to make a game. It's like, why is this a video game as a piece of media versus a book? Why didn't you just write this as a book? I think that Square Enix right now kind of really, honestly, I don't think if they know if they want to make movies or games right now. I really think they have that on so many different levels. They kind of have that problem. I think half people at Square Enix just want to make movies. I really do. Well, I mean, they've tried. They freaking tried.
Right, many, yeah. And that was, I think, a lot of people who work for the company. I mean, that is their job, is to make movies. To make the movies and cutscenes. And that's how it's been since the mid-'90s, when they were, pioneering the FMVs and doing all the cutscenes. Like, every video game company has people working on cutscenes, but Square Enix, that's such what they're known for. Yeah. And they got some really talented people who are good,
amazing animators
doing their movie portions of their games. Mm-hmm. My biggest issue with having a game be super cinematic is that a cinematic experience is a third the cost of a game. Like, sure, this game, it's like a movie. You could have watched it on a movie, but here it is as a game, and it's fun as a game, and that's fine. Except a game costs 3 times what a movie costs, and so it's almost like like Metal Gear Solid 4, if you're mostly just kind of watching a movie, you paid a lot to watch that movie.
You're saying, for what you purchased.
The consumer's
exactly.
Cost.
You bought a movie.
You bought a $60
the consumer. You bought a $60 movie, yeah, and that's fine. If it's a really, really good movie, or if it's...
I know some people break it down by the dollars per hour of entertainment,
because the game being played is technically longer, but if you're mostly watching a movie,
sometimes it's like a video game's just an excuse to make a really long movie. It's like, I want to make a movie. This will be way too long. I want it to be one movie.
Yeah, no one will pay $60 for a movie, but if we call it a game,
mash A to stab the guy, or whatever, or not get stabbed.
There are definitely
Heavy
instances.
Rain and LA Noire.
There are instances. I think the QuickTime event is a consequence of leaning too cinematic and taking really like interaction away from the player. And I think a lot of people don't like QuickTime events for that reason. So it's like, we can get the camera right there, and it's like, look at this freaking sick shot.
It's like, what does the player do?
Kratos is like
he
jumping up here, and then he like freaking stabs the guy's hand and like pulls off of that, and like it does this crazy thing. But it's like, I didn't do any of that. I watched it while hitting A at the right time. And so, like, that's an example, I would say, of it being out of balance. It's leaning too cinematic at the expense of the player feeling like they're doing or interacting something with the game.
Just freaking make video games. Just make games. If it's a game, it should be a game. There should be gameplay. That should be the core part of it. That's just my opinion. I think it's okay to have cutscenes and stuff like that. But
again, I think it's a matter of balance. And if you want to use it as a stylistic thing, I think in the way Mass Effect has used it, they usually just mostly use it for dialogue and conversations and stuff. But when you play,
which is nice. Mass Effect actually does a great job
it's a good balance, and they have.
You don't feel like you just watch.
There's some good cutscenes there and stuff, but like imagine in Mass Effect 3, right, that battle at the very end where it's basically just a movie, and it plays out similarly to how a movie would be paced and shot and everything like that. You have everybody on the good side, coming this way. Guys on the bad side coming this way, and you cut to them, and they have their little dialogue. But what wouldn't it be sweet if you're standing on the bridge of the ship as Shepard and you're looking from his perspective at the Reapers as they're coming at you for this big battle, rather than all these cinematic angles of the ship flying around in the battle. Like you're actually
you're
it's
there.
just too
you're detached when it's a cinematic, and you're
but it's more
attached when you're the guy.
It's more exciting to see all the cool angles of it, and you get a sense for how the whole battle is progressing, because the filmmaker who's making that cutscene is showing you with purpose very specific things so that you can get the story of the battle, right? Do you want that, or do you want the immersed in the character experience where you don't get to see how the whole battle's progressing unless you're talking with the other characters and getting information from them? They're telling you where.
Oh, the battle's going really well.
Or you just make it.
Then you're not seeing it.
Make it an RTS StarCraft game for that part of the game. Just be like,
there you go.
So if you go attack that guy.
Overhead.
So it's all about stylistic choice, and whether or not you enjoy that stylistic choice, it depends on who you are. I think that there's room for all of it. I would just like to see some more advances on the side of gameplay being used to communicate a story, rather than the cutscene being used like default exposition dump. Then here you go, play the game again. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, that was a good one, Liam.
All right.
Thank you very much. You guys totally came through. If your question did not get answered here, like, we're going to be listing these freaking things out, so it'll probably appear on a future podcast, maybe even not for a month, but
yeah,
we have got a lot of questions from you guys.
We got a lot of material. And also keep them coming.
Yeah, keep sending us.
It's
keep sending
4
us.
o'clock.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be streaming right now.
So
I apologize to you a day after. I apologize to you now for not being on stream on time.
Patreon, by the way, Patreon stream. You guys go check out our Patreon. We met our first goal. We're gonna have another goal set up here. We're gonna have to discuss that. If you guys have great ideas for goals for our Patreon, go ahead and post them in the comments below so we can get to that and just keep growing. So thank you guys so much for watching today, and we'll see you guys freaking next week.
Peace.
Get on the stream.
Goodbye.